All right, and we are on to the final section of Saviors of Uldum, which is neutrals. I actually haven't even seen all these cards yet, and I've been, things have been a little bit hectic, and I'm curious to see if what I have not actually looked through yet. But to start, Dwarven Archeologist. 2-cost, 2/3. After you discover a card, reduce its cost by 1. This card is cool. It's a 2-cost, 2/3. Totally reasonable stat line, and the effect is pretty good. After you discover a card, reduce its cost by 1. Obviously, if you're going to be using this, you want to like curve it into things that are just either use it for something which is immediately discovering, or curve it into something you're going to be discovering, say like next turn, right? If you play Archeologist into say a 3-drop discover thing, then you can obviously plan for how that's going to curve you out. So I don't really know exactly where you use this. I don't really know necessarily where all the sort of discover cards are. But I mean, this can be powerful. Like if there's stuff like the like Cabal Courier style cards, right? There's like a 3-drop that you discover with, and I think there is. I think there's a discover a spell card that costs 3, if I'm not mistaken. And a variety of other sorts of things. You can even just use this with like Omega Assembly, right? You can use this with Cloning Device and Mage. You cloning device, discover a card from a minion from your opponent's deck, boom, costs 1 less. So there's a lot of cool stuff that this can do. Even imagine like in Wild with like Shadow Visions. You can go infinite with your Shadow Visions with just 1 Radiant. You just Dwarven Archeologist, Radiant, boom, 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 cast infinite Shadow Visions. Get 'em! So anyway, just lots of cool stuff that this can do. I doubt this is going to be like a staple card by any means, but I can imagine a deck with like some amount of like heavy discover stuff that uses this and can use it very well. Next up is Spitting Camel. This card is cool. At the end of your turn, deal 1 damage to another random friendly minion. 2/4 Beast for 2. So this is a pretty just like solidly statted minion as long as you don't have other early game minions. 2/4 for 2. Very strong at fighting for the board early on. Again, as long as you're not planning on curving out with anything else, this is a reasonably statted like tough thing for your opponents to remove. It's a beast, so it can potentially have like beast synergies if you're looking at Druid or looking at Hunter. I'm not really sure that it really fits in necessarily like that many places. But if you're just like want some early game defense, can do the job to a reasonable degree. You can also use this in like Warrior, where you care about like damaging your own stuff. Put like Camel into like Acolyte of Pain, right? You just immediately get a card draw and have your 2/4 body on the board. You can play it with like Frothing Berserker or I was thinking like Grim Patron. There's no more Grim Patron right now, but something like that, right? That you actually care about damaging your own stuff and get benefits out of it, and that can be pretty powerful. So I think it's a cool card, and I expect to see like some fringe play as sort of early game defense for otherwise low minion decks, but probably not too much. Next up we have Cobbled Sandtrooper. Death Rattle, deal 3 damage to the enemy hero. This is a bigger Leper Gnome. I expected to see a fairly similar amount of play to Leper Gnome. I mean, the fact that it's 3 damage, it's a more substantial chunk of damage. I mean, maybe we're playing like the singleton Face Hunter, and we care about okay, well this is a 2/1 that deals 3. We just get them. Like that's actually even if your opponent kills this, they take 3 damage. It's a pretty significant effect, and if they don't kill it, all right, well you just attack for 2 a turn. I actually think this is my initial instinct was, well, it's like a Leper Gnome but more expensive. It's like, well, actually it's more threatening and deals more damage even if they kill it. So I think that this is actually a pretty reasonable card for like a hyper aggressive deck that really just cares about getting additional damage in. So I could easily see this in like aggro Reno Hunter. Probably not so much in like just sort of like a zoo style deck. Cares much more about board control. But I mean, like imagine this is just in a burn mage deck, right? Like you just play this as a possible 2-drop when you're playing just like a bunch of face damage, and it can easily just like get that job done. Next up is Quicksand Elemental. Whatever happened to Shrinkmeister? Shrinkmeister at one point was like a really cool card, and it was a priest card, and it was give one guy -2. This is all enemy minions -2. And it's an elemental, so it's got even more effect. I think this card is really interesting. This is like pretty insane in any kind of like minion-based like mirror match where you just like play this, attack all your stuff into their stuff, get them. Like really powerful in like arena, really powerful in like in just like minion brawls. Also, gives you a way to enable stuff like Cabal Shadow Priest against like 4 attack minions. enable stuff like Shadow Pain. I think this is actually like a pretty interesting card. Certainly has some interesting utility in priest decks and potentially, you know, elsewhere. Like the elemental tag doesn't have that many applications right now. There isn't that many things. There's not like the Ungoro elementals that you know previously would like chain everything like that. There is like Earth and Might and like, you know, kind of small sort of stuff. I don't know. It's interesting. But yeah, I mean, like playing Quicksand Elemental with like Mossy Horror, right? You Quicksand, you know, Mossy Horror your opponent, boom. Put this in like a Shudderwock deck. Get in the right order, you just keep wrathing on your opponent. But yeah, so very, very cool. And I can definitely see this being a card that sees a decent amount of play. Lots of like interesting possible applications for sure. We are definitely not in alphabetical order like we were with some of the previous ones, but Volterra Scoundrel. This is a 3-cost 2/3 battlecry, discover a spell or pick a mystery choice. This is interesting. I mean, like this obviously works with the previous, like, you know, -1 cost to your discovers. You know, this kind of, you know, interesting sort of value thing. The fact that you have a mystery choice is kind of funny. It's like, you know, what's in the box? You know, it could even be a boat. But yeah, I don't know. Like the 2/3 body is, you know, pretty mediocre. This is basically an ethereal lackey with an extra bonus option. But I think this you know could go into some sort of decks that like maybe again like goes into like a Highlanders type deck that wants a little bit more utility, doesn't necessarily have access to all the spells that you want. It could go into a deck that particularly cares about discovers, like with the previous card we were discussing. I think overall it's unlikely to see that much play, but it does have, you know, enough flexibility that I think that it could find some home, especially in singleton decks. All right, next up we have History Buff. 3-cost 3/4. Whenever you play a minion, give a random minion in your hand +1/+1. So this is like, you know, a hand buff lover's dream. This has, you know, the potential like in like say the Paladin deck, right? That like has a bunch of things that generate other small minions. This is one of the payoff cards for just getting a bunch of small minions in your hand. You know, you have all the other things that can possibly hand buff, but then you're like, okay, well, all my hand buff things are going to keep hand buffing in addition. It seems quite powerful in Arena. It's already a spider tank that, you know, then just continues to make your things slightly above curve. But I think even in Constructed, this has some potential. Obviously, it's random minions, so you're not necessarily going to be able to just like pile a bunch of stuff on like a charger or anything like that. But if you are playing like a deck that cares about like, you know, playing a bunch of minions, right? You're playing like a deck that like generates a bunch of extra stuff in your hand that you just keep playing out and like has the hand buff style of thing going on. I think this is a card that is worth considering, and I'm certainly going to try building like a hand buff Paladin deck. It's even called History Buff, right? He's buffing, he's hand buffing, he knows my history of hand buffing, and I'm going to make that the future as well. Next up we have Body Wrapper. 4-cost 4/4 battlecry, discover a friendly minion that died this game, shuffle it into your deck. This is just kind of a weird card, right? Like, obviously it's not reliable for getting any specific individual minion back, but having the ability to possibly get some of your, you know, sort of additional effects. You know, this again is another card that's like, well, this is interesting in a singleton deck because you can get it. You can get like your Zephyrus back or your Reno back or your Elise back. Shuffle them back into your deck, do it again. I think that this is, you know, a cool, unique effect that we haven't really seen in Hearthstone. Like you know, okay, I'm gonna get to reuse my minion entirely. Like there's been resurrect effects, but not really the sort of thing for like battle cries. And the fact that, you know, it's like you can get back your battle cry after it's died and use it again is really interesting. I mean, I can see this being used in Quest Shaman possibly if you want to, like, you know, get more battle cry effects that you've already used. Probably too many minions in that deck that do like too many like sort of just like similar things. It doesn't really matter that you get, you know, more of this back. But doubling it gives you even more chances. I don't know, and it doesn't necessarily rely on like the minions surviving, like a, you know, Brewmaster or a Baleful Banker. You can actually use it with like minions that you're playing like on curve and just sort of, you know, do their purpose and die. I mostly just want to keep getting Zephyrus back with this because Zephyrus gives me the perfect card, and I just want to keep getting the perfect card. Next up we have Phalanx Commander. 5-cost 4/5. Your taunt minions have +2 attack. Meh. I don't really even in like a taunt warrior deck, I don't see this as being a good card. I think this is more like, okay, you know, maybe you have like an arena deck where you have a bunch of taunt stuff and this is pretty good because this guy's understated, doesn't really do, you know, nearly enough, I think, to justify that in Constructed. And like, you know, you have stuff like, you know, Armageddillo or like the buff card. You don't just need that many more buff things. I think it's just mostly a relatively low impact thing that will unlikely see Constructed play. Next up is Faceless Lurker, 5 cost, 3/3 with Battlecry, double this minion's health. It's an interesting card with buffs. Obviously, like the more you buff this, you get double buffs on every buff. So you buff it once, it's a 5/10. It is very vulnerable to silence effects since it goes all the way back to 3/3 as a 5-drop. But yeah, no, I think this is you know a cool card for that hand buffish style deck in specifically Taunt Warrior that does the hand buff style thing. I don't know that it's necessarily just better than playing like a decent statted guy to begin with, so you don't have to rely on the taunts the buffs all the time. But even just like without buffs, it's a 3/6 for 5, which is not a disaster, right? That's like a bog whatever, not a bog creeper. It's a fen creeper, right? Which is like not good. But it's not a disaster to actually have that. Like a Dire Horn Hatchling wasn't a disaster. Obviously it had this bonus effect, but this has, a very big upside if you are able to multi-buff it and then play it against an aggro deck, and that they are going to, go through a ton of health to actually try and kill it. Next up is Blatant Decoy. 6 cost, 5/5, Death Rattle. Each player summons the lowest cost minion from their hand. Sort of a weird card, right? I don't really know what you do with this. It's, is this intended as a disruptive card for your opponents, like Zephyrus, if they're playing, like a singleton deck? Is this kill a Sorcerer's Apprentice against, some sort of Antonitis combo deck? It has some utility. I mean, frankly, maybe you play this in a deck that just doesn't have small stuff, right? You're playing Blatant Decoy, and then you're okay, well my smallest thing is Tyrion, right? My smallest thing is this huge thing. That's really where I see this as possibly having some application. You're either playing it as, okay, I really care about hitting your very key utility thing as part of your combo, or I'm just putting enormous things into play off of it. And I think the latter is most likely where you'll see this. Next up is Wasteland Scorpid. Mixta grew a little bit bigger and costs a little bit more, and is going to see pretty similar amount of play, which is 0. Next up we have Pit Crocolisk. This is a very strong arena card, and will not see play in Constructed. Full stop. Next up we have Living Monument. 10 cost, 10/10. It does give you a 10 cost taunt. That was actually, the relevant element of this is that there's a taunt that can come off of Sea Giant with Conjurer's Calling, basically. Which is powerful, right? That's actually a pretty big deal. That's where this will mostly matter, is Evolve effects and Conjurer's Calling. And, the fact that Sea Giant can now be defensive, in terms of getting Conjurer's Calling into 10/10 taunt is pretty powerful. Obviously it's a relatively small chance, but previously there was no chance. So this is if anything kind of a buff to Sea Giant Conjurer's Calling, which we didn't need. Next up is Mischiefmaker. 3 cost, 3/3, Battlecry, swap the top card of your deck with your opponents. I mean, maybe you just play a deck that has a bunch of terrible cards and this, and you're like, what I'm going to do? I'm going to take your card and beat you with it. I mean, this is a possible disruptive tool against, combo decks. But, compare this to, Gnome Feratu, right? Gnome Feratu was, not that amazing at dealing with combo decks. It was mostly used as, a way that you just sort of marginally won fatigue situations against your opponent. And this doesn't do that. And is similarly only okay at possibly disrupting a synergistic combo deck. So I think it's mostly just kind of a meme card and not really legitimately something that we're going to see people using for significant disruption. Maybe you play this, in a metagame where I don't know, your opponent has, I don't know, against Holy Wrath Paladin, and you just really hope that they put their Cheval into their deck at a bad time. I don't know. Seems bad to me. Next up we have Desert Hare, a 3 cost 1/1 that makes 2 other 1/1s. So makes 3 1/1s for 3, and it's a beast. All of them are beasts. So if you care about having a bunch of beasts, maybe this is good. If you care about Evolve, I think this is actually probably, if there's actually a AoE Evolve, this is a 3-drop that makes 3 3-drops. If you actually have Evolve again, or whatever sort of AoE Evolve, then I see this as possibly being powerful. It's not like a Doppelgangster though. It doesn't work with hand buffs, because it doesn't summon copies of this. It just summons other additional copies, additional Desert Hares, not copies of Desert Hare. So there's no Arena Fanaticing this, or history buffing it, or whatever else. But yeah, it's 3 things for 1 card. Works with Stormbringer, works with Bloodlust obviously, but you gotta keep those things alive. So I doubt this will be like really all that popular. Maybe there will be things that like care about beasts dying, other than like, you know, a hyena they have to set up. Maybe you play this, you know, and as one card, you know, giving you 3/1/1s that you can charge in with Thunder Rhino because you don't have Spring Paws or something. I don't know. Octodad is awesome. This card is hilarious. 8 cost, 8/8, Death Rattle, draw 8 cards. I love it. I love it. This card I think is actually like not bad. In particular, this card I think is like kind of ridiculous in Death Rattle Rogue. Like Death Rattle Rogue that can actually like reduce this to cost 1 and just play it after like emptying their hand is like boom. I'll like, you know, just draw a bunch of extra cards. Super cool. Yeah, I don't give cards star ratings, but I give this 8 stars. It also has such a cool animation where like once he dies, it's like that you see the tentacles like whoosh, like grab cards from your deck and pull them over to you. You don't actually see the cards move, but you get my point. It's so cool. But yeah, I think this card is super neat. What I really want to see is you know, people like get this off of like some random effect and then just get horrifically decked. I think like one of the first games that I saw with this, I think like I got like Void Contract or someone got like Void Contract off of it was Purple. Purple got Void Contract off of like a random spell, and then his Octosari died. And then he just like, you know, had no cards instantly. It was pretty funny. But yeah, this card is super cool. I actually think it's pretty good. It obviously going to be like a sort of narrow, you know, case of where it's good, but I think it's actually pretty good. And I'm excited to try it out and have this sweet, sweet animation. Next up we have Golden Scarab. A 3 cost 2/2 battle cry, discover a 4 cost card. I think this is another card that's like, okay, well maybe this is good in like a Reno style deck where you really want to fill out your curve. You know, you're less likely to be able to build a consistent deck, so this gives you more flexibility, you know, more access to stuff that you want to be able to actually curve out with, and additional sort of utility in the case of, for instance, like Paladin, right? Paladin has a bunch of really good 4 cost cards. They have True Silver, they have Consecration, you know, the Kings, and like Reno Paladin or like Finley Paladin. You know, this is a totally decent way to like curve into something, which I think is you know, totally reasonable. I don't know if there's like necessarily like there's no more like double battle cries outside of the Shaman quest, so you can't like, you know, go nuts with this like, you know, old brand or whatever. But overall, I think this is just like a fine card. It's definitely not gonna be something that just like shows up in a bunch of decks, but could definitely see some play in specific Reno decks that want to be proactive. And specifically, I think the Singleton Paladin, you know, is very likely to have a lot of use for this. Oh god, this is Zephyrus the Great. This is the coolest card in all of Hearthstone. When all the sort of Singleton cards were revealed, I was like, yeah, I really hope there's like another one, because like these just don't really necessarily seem like they're cool enough to like justify building a Singleton deck, you know, and it'd be cool to like have some sort of excuse to build a Singleton deck from other classes. This card is just so cool. If your deck has no duplicates, wish for the perfect card. So the way that this works, for those who don't know, is it looks at the classic and basic set only. You'll never get like a Dr. Boom, you'll never get, you know, like any hero card, you'll never get, you know, any new card. You'll get classic and basic cards. And it always looks for, well, what can I do right now? Can I win the game right now? It'll always find lethal. It looks at like the mana you have available, the stuff that you have in play, the life totals. It doesn't look at the cards in your hand, right? So let's say your opponent's at 12, you have Fireball in hand in this guy. If you play this guy, it will not give you Fireball because it doesn't know that you have lethal with 2 Fireballs. But if you Fireball first and then play this guy, it'll be like, aha, it can give you Fireball and kill them. So like, not only is this card like super cool in terms of like creating these interesting like you know, game states where it's like, okay, I can get like, you know, this crazy thing that like, you know, my deck could never play, but it also rewards you for like understanding how it works and playing toward that. You know, for instance, if you very specifically want like let's say, you know, you really want to get like mind control, right? You'll want to spend all of your mana, like say you have 9 mana and you're like, I want to spend all of my mana and play this to get, so it'll give me a card for next turn because it knows I have no mana right now, so I'm not looking for a card for right now. So, you know, it'll like find me mind control for next turn. If you like specifically want like, you know, it's so cool. I am so happy this card exists. And I was talking to some of the designers. I was talking to Chad Nervig, Celestalon, about this card. And he was telling me this took like hundreds of man hours of like coding and like, you know, testing and tweaking to get right. It's like a multi-thousand lines of code that just determine how this card works. So for anyone out there who's like, oh, Blizzard only cares about making money, they don't want to like, you know, they don't want to do anything cool, they just, that's all, no. This is like, this card was like way more complicated than any other card in history of Hearthstone, and they just made it because it was cool. Anyway, I love this card, it's great. I'm definitely going to make like singleton decks that aren't even classes that can use the other singleton cards, because I just want to put this in them, and it's great, and I love it. So, all right, next up we have Kendall Taker, 3/2 Reborn. Maybe this sees play in a Reborn theme deck like the Quest, but I don't think it'll really see much play otherwise, just because, you know, the minion trades down pretty well. I don't know, I mean, this is basically like, you know, a 3/2 Death Rattle put a 2/1 into play. It's very similar to a Harvest Golem, but it's not a mech. And the fact that Harvest Golem sees some amount of play now is pretty much just because it's a mech, and that mech can survive and get mechanized on. So I think this is like okay, but unlikely to see very much play. Next we have Bug Collector, 2/1. Battlecry, summon a 1/1 Locust with Rush. So if you really care about getting, you know, the 1/1 Rush body, cool. It's kind of like a Tidehunter, Murloc Tidehunter, except you don't actually get the, you know, it's not Murlocs, but the thing is Rush, so it can attack right away. So pretty cool. Maybe you play it in like, you know, a deck that really cares about, maybe playing like Battlecry deck, you want to get a bunch of Locusts or something. I don't know. Seems like it's unlikely to see much play though. Let's go with Serpent Egg. Eggs always see some play, right? This is a 2-cost 0/3, Death Rattle summon a 3/4. So just by the fact that this is, you know, a cheap thing that summons something bigger than what you'd normally get from that mana cost, I think is like pretty good, right? Like this could easily see play in Grim Rally decks. This could see play in like buff decks. This can see play in, you know, a variety of things. It is worse than Nerubian Egg, but Nerubian Egg was insanely good. So I can see this seeing play in like Death Rattle decks. In you can even like play with this with, what is it, the Priest card that, you know, kills something and brings back a full health. You can play it with like Blade or whatever. It's not a, you know, the fact that you go to 3/4 doesn't outclass things like a curve up, right? Which most of the previous eggs have. They've been like a little bit bigger than what you normally get at like the cost even above them. But even being worse than like, you know, Devilsaur Egg and Nerubian Egg, those were really powerful cards that were like defining for a lot of decks they were in, so I think that you can be worse than those and still be good. Next up is Temple Berserker. 1/2 Reborn has +2 attack when damaged. Some people were playing this in some of their like kind of aggro, zoo-ish type decks during the release event thing, the live stream theory crafting thing. I think it's like fine. Definitely, you know, kind of tough to kill, right? Like the fact that it is, you know, it's a cheap minion that like, okay, I want to kill it. It's like, well, don't kill it. If you just leave it there, it's a 1 health thing, or 1 attack thing. So I don't really see this as seeing much play outside of decks that really lean on getting value from the Reborn. So next up we have Beaming Sidekick. It's a 1/2 for 1. Battlecry, give a friendly minion +2 health. Definitely, you know, the sort of thing that zoo-ish decks can use. Decent buff to, you know, like you play like a Flame Imp. Just buff up your Flame Imp. Get more stuff going on. You can find this with Crystology. Maybe you're playing a Paladin deck that wants to, you know, buff up your guys, keep them alive. I don't know. This is just a lot of like onboard stats for 1. Anything that costs 1 and has like a reasonable impact like this is definitely worth taking a look at. So, you know, like it may seem fairly innocuous on its own, but it's very cheap and can fit into, you know, a lot of spots in your curve if you're looking to keep a board alive. So I think it's actually pretty good. Next up is Injured Tol'vir. This card is great. Just by itself, right? This is a 2-cost 2/3 taunt. Even before you keep in mind the fact that this can be healed, it can be resurrected as a 2/6. It is just a good card. This is like one of the cards that I think makes the Priest quest work. One of the cards that makes Psychopomp work. One of the cards that makes, you know, the world go round, basically. This is just a really, really, really good card. You know, if you just want a 2/3 taunt for 2, this is your only option too, and it's just with additional effects. If you don't want your 2/3 to be able to be executed, then, you know, you're in for a bad time. But just overall, awesome card, works really well. Super stoked to play it. Next up we have Wrapped Golem, a 7/5 Reborn. At the end of your turn, summon a 1/1 Scarab with Taunt. This card's just really powerful, especially in like Arena, right? Like in Arena, you play this and it's like, okay, well, you've got to get through my 1/1 Taunt, then you've got to kill my 7/5, then you've got to kill my 7/1. It's, you know, like Obsidian Destroyer was a class card that was a powerful arena card, and this is like Obsidian Destroyer on steroids. I can even see this just being like maybe even seeing like some degree of constructed play. Probably not. It's too easy to get through these sort of things. But it is a serious card. This is not an easy card to kill, especially if you're actually just trying to kill it in combat, which is basically what Arena is. Next up is Kartut Defender. 3/4 Taunt Reborn, Death Rattle, restore 3 health to your hero. This card is just good. You know, this is a very, very powerful card in like a lot of defensive decks. It's very similar to like a Sludge Belcher / Apple Bomb. You know, it takes multiple attacks to get through. Granted, one of those attacks just is a 1 health minion, so you can ping it down, stab it down, wacky it down, whatever. You know, this is, you know, like a really, really sick card against aggressive decks, against like even against like mid-range decks. This is like one of the key cards when I was playing the Plot Twist deck. It's, you know, it's great to get off of a Plot Twist with either Betrug or Dorian. It's great to just play naturally and gain a bunch of life back. Just seems like a decent card. I don't think it's like, you know, it's no Sludge Belcher, right? It's not quite that good, but it is not that far off, and there's a lot of room for something to be a lot worse than Sludge Belcher and still be a good card. Okay, next up is King Phaora. This is such a weird card. It's a 10 cost 5/5. For each spell in your hand, summon a random minion of the same cost. So, this is going in my Pyroblast Puzzle Box deck, and I'm just going to play it and get nothing but 10 cost guys. It's going to be glorious. I mean, obviously, this is a card that wants to go in big spell deck, right? And I feel like there's, you know, there's legit stuff that makes you, you know, build like a big spell deck. And this is a really big payoff. This is obviously, you know, Spiteful Summoner. But it's not Spiteful Summoner that you have to play all gigantic things, right? Because you just have some small things. That's fine too. You just get more things. But, you know, I think this card is like really cool. Interesting how it informs your deck building, how you want to actually build around, play around this. I doubt it's going to be that good, simply because 10 is a lot. It is very conditional on the state of your hand, and, you know, like, we live in a world where people are clearing boards full of like 8/8s and whatnot regularly, or they're losing anyway. So I think it's a cool card. It's unlikely to be a very good card, but I'm certainly going to try and make it work. Next up, though, is Siamat, who is a cool card and a good card. 7 cost 6/6 Battlecry, gain 2 of Rush, Taunt, Divine Shield, or Wind Fury. This card is just very good. You know, this is very often, if you're in a defensive position, you're just like, okay, Rush Divine Shield or Rush Wind Fury to either kill one thing or kill 2 things. Or, like, you know, if you're in like a fairly neutral game state, you're like, all right, Divine Shield Wind Fury, or Divine Shield Taunt, or Taunt Wind Fury. I just think this is so good. It's going to go into a lot of different decks. It works really well with Shudderwalk, works with Double Battlecry Quest, works with, you know, just a lot of stuff. It's like, yeah, it's very similar to like the Ziliax with the set. It's just like, okay, as long as you're playing a deck that wants to like have some sort of like mid-range defensive creature, this is for you, and it's got a lot of utility. I don't think it's quite as good as Ziliax. I don't think it'll go in quite as many decks, because, you know, the fact that Ziliax gives life gain makes it have some pretty like wide applications against like different strategies where this is not quite good enough. But overall, I think this card is super sweet. We'll see a lot of play. Next up is Conjured Mirage. 4 cost 3/10. At the start of your turn, shuffle this minion into your deck. I mean, I guess maybe you like silence it. Maybe you just play it and, you know, your opponent can't attack you because it's like it's a 3/10. I mean, you can play this like, you know, you'll just never fatigue, right? It's like, okay, I'll play a Conjured Mirage. Do you kill it? All right, I won't fatigue. Okay, I'll play Conjured Mirage. I'll play Conjured Mirage. But yeah, it's mostly just like I will try and stall a turn. It's trying to, you know, basically absorb a bunch of damage, which you can do. I mean, for 4. But yeah, this is a card that's going to take some weird strategizing to figure out how to actually use it. But if you're playing a deck that's like just looking to stall, I think it could actually be good, right? Like, this is obviously not a card that you play because you are, you know, trying to fight for the board. You know, this is a card that you play because you're like, all right, I'm trying to get to some big thing, right? It's kind of like a Frost Nova in that your opponent is probably not going to attack their guys and do it and kill it, right? They're probably going to let it shuffle into your deck. So, you know, rather than like actually trade things. So it feels like the sort of thing where it's like, okay, I play this because I, you know, really want to get to turn 5, 6, 7. But your opponent can obviously just load up the board against it, right? So, I don't know. It's very interesting. I doubt this is going to be that good, but I would not be surprised to see this in some, like, weird combo deck that's just looking to delay the game. All right, next up we have Bone Wraith. 4 cost 2/5 Taunt Reborn. I think this card is just good. Obviously, like, you know, compare this to other taunts that might see play, like Proud Defender. Proud Defender is, you know, a little bit better if you are, you know, unlikely to have other minions at play at the time, I think, as a 4/6. because this is very similar to like, 6 health. Though it is, harder to attack into with a single minion. If it's just one big minion, gotta get through the second half too. 2 attack is not enough to kill a lot of things. Like there's a lot of 3/3s, right, that are going to attack into this, and you won't necessarily be able to kill. But the fact that it has Reborn is interesting in a lot of spots. I actually swapped my Proud Defenders for this in my Plot Twist deck because if these come out as 1/1s or come out from Betrug off the Plot Twists, you end up getting the extra body that comes back, which is kind of interesting. But I think this is like okay. I think this is like not amazing, but it definitely has some interesting applications, and I think that is worth considering for some decks over stuff like Proud Defender. Next up we have Mortuary Machine. 5 cost 8/8. After your opponent plays a minion, give it Reborn. I actually have not seen this card before. This is my first time seeing Mortuary Machine. It's kind of like the Fel Reaver, drawbacky type thing. This seems like a tough card to make work. Maybe you play this in like an aggro rogue deck where you have like saps and stuff, so your opponent plays like a big thing to try and stop this to give Reborn. You just bounce it back to their hand and you just smash them for 8. That's like kind of the only place that I could really see this. Otherwise, like, yeah, your opponent, giving your opponent's minions Reborn, it's like they play like a big taunt, and you're like, well, awkward. Yeah, I mean, you can always play this in a silence deck, but like I feel like in silence decks you can do better than a 5 cost 8/8 most of the time. You have like 3 cost 5/6s and things like that. It is a mech, it's true, which does have some potential for magnetic stuff, but overall I think that this is probably most likely to show up in aggro rogue because of the fact that sap is good against your opponent's stuff getting Reborn. So next up we have Vile Fiend. 2 cost 2/2 demon with lifesteal. I mean, there are things that buff demons, and Warlock does use their life total as a resource in a lot of ways. So, them caring about demons, possibly buffing this, could do a little bit of work, but 2 cost 2/2 feels like it's pretty tough to justify putting in a lot of decks. You'd have to have, a lot of good ways to buff this in order to really make it work. But spending 2 mana on something which just dies like a backstab in the matchups that you care about it the most, without some sort of help, is probably not going to get the job done. So I don't expect this to really see much play. Next up we have Sunstruck Henchman. 4 cost 6/5 at the start of your turn is a 50% chance to fall asleep. Ogres just like, I don't know why ogres are both dumb and lazy, but apparently this guy is at least lazy. I think this is worse than the other ogres we've seen in the past. A lot of the other ogres in the past were like 50% chance to hit the wrong target or whatever. Those at least attacked, right? And there's no wrong target when you're smorking. Yeah, you can kill their guy who could otherwise kill you, or you could hit their face, and you're happy with either of those. This 50% chance just to do nothing is a lot worse, right? Obviously, yes, maybe you could use this in a silence deck, but you're not really getting that many extra stats out of 4 cost 6/5 in order to actually justify silencing this. So I feel like this is unlikely to really see any play outside of people who are just trying to get lucky. Next up is Colossus of the Moon. 10/10 Divine Shield Reborn. This card is powerful. This is a card that I think is really good in like Dual Paladin. It's a card that I have considered putting in Plot Twist because if you get this off of either Betrug or the Dollmaster Dorian, it comes back as a 10/1 Divine Shield. Card's insane off of Duel. Card is awesome off of Muckmorpher. I think this is just like a very large, very difficult to deal with threat that is in any deck that has a way to basically cheat it out is going to have a desire to put this in that deck. So it's not going to be something that I expect people will be putting in their deck with the intention of just spending 10 mana on. I mean, it'll come up. But this is one of the best things you can possibly cheat out, and I expect people will be doing just that. All right, next up is Generous Mummy. 3 cost 5/4 with Reborn. Your opponent's cards cost 1 less. This is a dangerous card to play. You play this against like a Cyclone Mage, and they're just like, all right, play everything. Bleh. You play this like, against just like a rogue. They're like, all right, every lackey. Play everything. I feel like this is just like such a huge drawback and not really that big of a buff. Like, the fact that it's reborn, obviously it's like, okay, well, this is tough to kill. It's like, but you make it so easy for your opponent to kill it because other cards cost less. I feel like this would be a better, like a more powerful card if it had like just more stats and not reborn, because, you know, you're just like, okay, well, at least I connect with this once. This doesn't connect like so many times. I mean, if this were like the 8/8, right, instead of like the Fel Reaverish guy, it's like, okay, well, maybe a 3-cost 8/8 is like worth it, right? This, like, you know, your opponent doesn't even want to kill it, and like, you know, you can't even kill them that quickly with it because a lot of the power of this is being in reborn. So I don't know. I think this is just like such a dangerous card to ever put into your deck that I wouldn't be surprised if this is like the least played card of the expansion. Next up is Wasteland Assassin, 5-cost, 4/2 stealth reborn. I think this card's actually more interesting than it looks on the surface. On the surface, it's like, oh, okay, it's just like, you know, one keyword with a new keyword. But stealth and reborn on like a you know, relatively decent statted minion is kind of like just 2 removal effects, right? Like, this could easily be like attack your guy, kill 2 things over 2 turns. It's slow, but, you know, it's not terrible. The fact that it is stealth makes it so that they can't just like immediately kill the reborn thing. This is definitely a really good card in Arena. It could be a powerful card with Conjurer's Calling, right? You play it, kill the guy, calling the second half. Probably not going to see like that much play, but I don't think it's that far from being good. I think this is like actually kind of on the cusp of actually being good enough to see play. Next up was Infested Goblin, a 3-cost 2/3 taunt with Death Rattle. Add 2 1/1 Scarabs with taunt to your hand. Could go in, you know, Taunt Warrior. Could go in, you know, one of these hand buff style decks where you're using, you know, Glowstone Tech and or Arena Fanatic and or the History buff. You know, works with all this sort of stuff. But the fact that it's a 2/3 taunt that has to die before you get the Scarabs in your hand, doesn't really hold the fort very well. If it is in like Warrior, you know, it doesn't end up trading well with things. Warrior doesn't really, you know, if you're playing like Taunt Warrior, I guess you know, yes, maybe you still have Warpath and stuff, but you're not really, you know, doing incremental damage that well because of your hero power, etc., etc. But I think most likely, if this does see play, it's in Taunt Warrior, but I think it's probably still on the cusp of whether it even is interesting there. All right, next up is Anubisath Warbringer. Seems like a pretty powerful Arena card. Seems like it could be powerful if you reduce its cost to 1. Doesn't seem really all that powerful after that. It's just, you know, for Constructed, I think this is just like too little too late in terms of the sort of hand buff bonus you're getting. In terms of just how much you're spending on it. Next up is Neferset Ritualist. I think this card is a little bit overrated. I do think this card seems like it's pretty bananas in Arena, where obviously there's lots of minion trades going on. But I think this is in Constructed. I didn't even play this in my Quest Priest deck. Maybe I'm wrong in doing so. Maybe I'm better off having this than like, you know, something like a Divine Hymn. But, you know, you have to have like multiple minions that are damaged in play for this to be like that good. And, you know, how often does that actually happen in like Constructed, right? How often do you have like 2 big guys who need healing? You know, I think that especially if you're playing like Wild Pyromancer, having the spell-based versions of like Circle of Healing and Divine Hymn feels like it's more likely to consistently do what you want it to do, rather than just sort of sitting with this guy in your hand, hoping that you know, are able to get some trades in so you can use this effectively. All right, next up is Mogu Cultists. 1-cost, 1/1 battlecry. If your board is full of Mogu Cultists, sacrifice them all and summon Highkeeper Ra. I don't think I actually have the card image for Highkeeper Ra, so you're going to have to believe me when I tell you it's a 10-cost 20/20 that deals 20 damage to all your opponents at the end of the turn, which is pretty cool. This is very much like a meme card. You know, you're using this with stuff like Togwaggle Scheme, or, you know, you're using this with like, I don't know, mostly Togwaggle Scheme. Shuffle 3 copies of this into your deck kind of thing. The funny thing is, like, yeah, Lab Recruiter. The funny thing is you can actually get this off and lose. Like, in the Theory Crafting stream, I was playing as Ali Straza. I was playing Plot Twist Warlock. She was playing, you know, a Mogu Cultist deck. And I, like, you know, I was like, you know, beating her down or whatever, and she like got to the point where she was able to do the combo, killed all my stuff. Then I'm like, okay, Siphon Soul your guy, kill you. And I was like, well, all right. So I think it's cool. I'm definitely excited to see people pull this off. It'll definitely be like, you know, some quality YouTube highlight content, but it's not going to be good. It is just not going to be good. All right, next up is Fish Flinger. 2-cost, 3/2 Murloc. Battlecry, add a random Murloc to each player's hand. And this card is actually okay. Like, Murloc decks don't necessarily have decently statted guys. Most Murlocs are a bunch of like stuff like Tidecaller and things that are easy to kill. If you're playing a Murloc deck that is not Murloc Shaman, you don't necessarily have great generation for additional Murlocs, if you don't have access to Underbelly Angler. So Fish Flinger, giving you a little bit more Murloc action to play with can be pretty good. You're generally going to be better at using Murlocs than your opponent is because you're a Murloc deck, so you have things that give you ways to take advantage of synergies, etc., etc. So having a decently statted Murloc that generates you more value, I think, is totally fine. So I think this is an okay card. May not see play in Murloc Shaman again because I already have Angler, but could help enable other Murloc decks. Next up is Desert Obelisk. Speaking of meme cards, this is one of them. Control 3 of these end your turn, deal 5 damage to a random enemy. So if you have 3 of these, you do 15 total, because each of them triggers. So this is like, kind of like the Mogu Cultists. Then it's like, okay, I'm going to try and get a bunch of extras of these. This is, obviously requires a bit less work than the Mogu Cultist. But you can use this with like the Shadow of Death thing. Shuffle 3 of them into your deck. Draw through your entire deck. Shadow of Death, another one. Draw through the entire deck. Boom! You got 6 of them in play. 30 damage. And 20 of it hit 4 lackeys. And then they killed you. But yeah, I don't know. I think this is definitely a neat card. Going to be another one of those sort of like meme trying to do crazy highlight things. Never going to be good. But I'm curious to see the best Obelisk highlight video when it does go off. All right, next up is Mermy. 1-cost 1/1 Reborn Murloc. So this is obviously a potential enabler for the Reborn quest, making Emperor Raps into Mermy the Murloc. Mermy the Murloc Mummy. Also, I just think this is a good card for Murloc decks. A 1/1 with Reborn in a tribal group that cares about keeping your guys in play to give them buffs with stuff like War Leader or Seer and whatnot. I think this is just good. Stability, like actually having survivability for your minions is one of the things that has long been the downfall of Murloc decks. Right, like you have a bunch of fragile stuff. You have Oracle. You have the 2/1. You have more 2/1s. You have even more 2/1s and 1/1s. This is like actually something that can survive, stay in play, get like Toxfinned, get War Leader, etc. And I think this is just a very solid card for those Murloc decks. So I think this, despite being sort of unassuming in terms of just being a basic minion with a keyword, is actually very, very good. What is not as good is Jar Dealer. Death Rattle at a random 1-cost minion in your hand. Meh. I don't know, maybe this goes into a Death Rattle Zoo Swarm-ish deck, but I'm unexcited about it. Meh. And last, but certainly not least, is Questing Explorer. Questing Explorer, 2-cost 2/3, Battlecry. If you control a quest, draw a card. I have played a lot of these already. Actually, during the Theory Crafting stream, every single deck that I played was a quest deck, and every single one of those had 2 of this. I eventually cut one of them from one of the decks, but no, this is just a great card. One of the big drawbacks of quests is that they cost a card from your opening hand. So having ways to recoup that card disadvantage in a straightforward way, I think is really nice. Questing Explorer also it's a card draw effect for the Warlock quest. It's a Battlecry effect for the Shaman quest. It just kind of goes everywhere, and it's just great. So I love the existence of this card. It's frankly also not without cost, right? Because if you're playing one of those quest decks, you draw this after you've completed your quest. It's just a 2/3 for 2, right? You've just drawn a River Crocolisk. Despite the fact that it seems like it's just an auto include that comes at incredibly low cost, which is true. It's fairly auto-include, but I don't know that it's necessarily 2 of in every quest deck. I don't even know that I'd play this in, say, the Warrior quest deck, right? The Warrior quest deck might want different stuff. The quests that complete quickly that don't use the tools on here. I don't even know that this goes into the Reborn quest, right? If you're playing the Paladin quest, this probably doesn't even go in your deck, right? So I think that it's not obvious that it necessarily goes into all of the quest decks, but it is something which you can at least try at first and be like, oh no, I complete my quest too quickly, then I draw this and it's bad. So I think this overall is just a really cool card. I love the fact that it exists to help take some of the sting out of the card disadvantage from always having the quest in your opening hand and having it cost you a card. and also really like the fact that it just naturally dovetails very well with a couple of the quests, namely the Shaman and Warlock quests, because those are two of my favorite. But anyway, that's it. We got through all of the cards. Anyway, thank you all very much for watching. I am super excited, as I've said a number of times, for Saviors of Uldum. This is probably the set that I am looking forward to the most for years. Probably the most that I've been looking forward to since Knights of the Frozen Throne. So many different decks that I want to try, even after trying a few decks during the live theory crafting streams. I want to go back and play and tune those decks more and still try like a dozen plus different decks. So again, thank you all very much for watching. Let me know what your favorite cards are, what decks you are looking forward to playing, and I will see you next time.